Hey there, friends. This is going to be one of those two slideshows in one day, two YouTubes. My YouTubes are often slideshows. That might seem like an underuse of bandwidth, but on the other hand, as you've seen, I'll get more than I'll get more than one slideshow going sometimes. Um, I think there's a limit to the bandwidth that we want to take for granted. So, because my stories are also kind of lots of characters, people coming in and out, and this one, no exception, is going to feature Uncle Bill. So I'm going down to Union Station today. This is after making a YouTube this morning about Shoji Sadao and his relationship to the Osamu Noguchi exhibit, Best of Friends. That was back in the New York City area. Here we are in Greater Portland, Oregon. That's my car through the brush there that or the ornamental plants. This is a maintained garden right in front of Union Station. At the end, when we were going back to the train, because Bill only comes down, my 94-year-old, I call him my uncle. He's my grandmother's sister's kid. So he's 94 years old and he just comes down for the day. Today was Sunday and this place was closed, which is kind of good for us because given the train was late going back north, we had time to duck out and go to Papa Haydn's. So you'll see those pictures. Now, I've been studying another topic that may interest you as historians, right? We've been talking about the asylum district in Portland, and Bill and I went there today. I pointed out the food pod called Hawthorne Asylum. It's not a nightclub. And then we went to Lucky Lab and I had a couple beers. We both had the pulled pork sandwich. So the other topic I want to include here and insert besides just the asylum district and the asylum and all that thread has been fun, but let's bring in this next one, which is Humphrey Bogart's first wife, who grew up here in Portland, and the story behind that. And she was making it in her own, she was already a sensation and had a big career shaping up in front of her, independently of anyone named Humphrey Bogart. And how their relationship got started, actually, there's not a whole lot of details here, but they had that relationship. And I've heard stories from other relatives about how Humphrey Bogart was not that uncommon a sight at certain bars downtown. The interesting thing here is she got involved in a quote lesbian themed drama, and it was kind of like the space in Cape Town. It was like broaching subjects and talking about taboo things at a time that wasn't ready, or this was really too edgy for the time. And the police like came in and shut it down, and people involved got in trouble, you could say. And so she was suddenly someone in trouble, and that was also stressful. And Humphrey Bogart went on to marry other people too. So I just wanted to just jump in and say this is part of Portland's history. So that was a topic I brought up with Bill today as well. The Coast Starlight, which goes all the way down the coast of California and through the exact route, you should research it. It's worthwhile taking this train if you don't expect it to be on time always. It's quite on time coming from Seattle. You see 2 p.m. on time because it originates right from there or from Vancouver, BC, perhaps, and it hasn't had as much time to get behind coming from the north, I would say. Whereas coming from the south, we're talking a much longer route, much more chance to get sidelined. The freight trains have priority in this country. Passenger trains play second fiddle. So push comes to shove. Once you get a little bit late, then they sideline you every time as a passenger train, or at least it used to be that way. I'm not the super expert on how the game is played. I think of the internet when I think of trains. I think of routing packets. I think of TCP/IP. And I think of a business based on chartered coaches that get routed all over the place joining one train after another, and also being left parked in obscure areas, maybe who knows where. Maybe there's some vehicles, like maybe it's three cars and one of them's a box car full of supplies and motorcycles or something. So the people who are living this way and being tracked, they're not lost. They're, in the system, so to speak. And there could be lots of routing going like this. Anyway, business plan for the far future someday. Here we are in Union Station looking at the latest graphics. Beautiful station, as I've said. It's large and yet miniature at the same time. It feels kind of like Disneyland, which is built on a different scale. And I'm not saying it's miniature in any way. It just being the size that it is astounding. Here's a Robert De Niro movie is coming out, and Amtrak has him on their cover. Beautiful bicycle, I believe, on its way somewhere. There's me taking my picture inside one of those, put in some money and get your weight relics. I don't think it's actually still operational. As you can tell, there's a lot of sort of the old America kept alive here. This is a monument to nostalgia in some ways, I guess you could say. It's a train station that's been deliberately kept in good condition the way it's always been. These are some of the cartoons going on. Not really Thomas the Tank Engine, more like Toy Story in their flavor. So that's the Coast Starlight. You can see it's a double decker. It's finally come in. Actually, let's see, is this leaving or coming? I think Bill has just arrived, and on time we go to Lucky Lab, where the old Hawthorne Asylum used to be. Not that it all fit on this one property. It was quite a few what we would call city blocks by today's surveys, right? So we talked about family history. I'll just say that, Bill's branch of the family were Swedish pioneers on Mercer Island, which is where I-90 currently goes through. They saw that happen, right? It used to not even have a floating bridge. It was just a ferry periodically. And this family created ran the first gas station. I asked about delivering ice. Turns out Ernie did bring an ammonium plant over so that they could deliver milk. And for that purpose, they needed ice to keep the milk cold as they delivered it in glassware. This has been a theme over on Facebook lately. We're talking about, by the way, we ended up at Papa Haydn's, and I took the obligatory kind of not so, maybe my lens maybe needs cleaning off at this point. I better double check that. It looks kind of faded. We'll see. But we're talking about milk and glassware on Facebook. And actually, I'm correct in remembering what Tetra Pak used to mean, an actual tetrahedron. I think they used Tetra Pak to mean something more, I don't know, not as much a tetrahedron as it used to be. But in the old days when I was buying milk in Italy, I actually got a Tetra Pak that was a tetrahedron. Not saying I know how practical those was. I think they were pretty sturdy. Here's another advertisement that features all the many Tetra Paks that were tetrahedron shaped at the time. I remember this from the 1960s, 70s, mostly 60s is what I remember. So back to my photo stream, just winding it up here. Major game going on, huge boards stitched together. This is a kind of a World War I biplanes, blimps game that pretty serious game players here. There's the blimps, right? I would have just, enjoyed learning about how that game's played. And this whole Lucky Lab is kind of filled with gamers. There's the Go players and so on. So now we find out the train is delayed for a couple hours, right? It's not going back at 4. It's not arriving until 5:10. So that's when we got back in the car and headed to 23rd Northwest. Let's see if this looks faded or what. That looks better. That picture looks okay. So I guess the lens is okay. So yeah, we went to Papa Haydn's. Now I don't eat like this very often. This is what I would consider uh, a lifestyle that I don't partake of too often. But already I have another YouTube out there with us at Papa Haydn's, and I say much the same thing. So I'm starting to sound like the guy who's always at Papa Haydn's and says he's never at Papa Haydn's. Good place if you come through Portland. They do their own bakery. It's just one of those high-end, amazing desserts kind of place. If you have a sweet tooth, my mom does not. So and I guess I could say I like cake. I can't deny liking cake, right? So these are some of the shops that we have in Northwest Portland. So place-based education. I'm outside my usual Asylum District or Hawthorne District, across the river in what in a lot of ways is a mirror image community. It has some of the similar vibes, similar shops, but it is a more developed area. I'm going to end this back in the Crowbar, back in Asylum District at my own Hawthorne Fred Meyer's at the bar there, the Crowbar as we call it, because it's a Kroger's, with some wind-up pictures of Uncle Bill. Now, as I close out here, let me just hold up his book, which I believe I've done before on this channel. Here we go. So after Uncle Bill retired as a mining engineer, he turned into an historian. It kind of surprised everybody. We didn't know he was going to suddenly write a very detailed history of the pre-World War I submarine making industry, submarine manufacturing in the Pacific Northwest, like in Seattle area, Vancouver, BC, and like that. They were building submarines before World War I. And if you read this book, you learn a lot about how we descended into kind of a greater barbarism since those days, right? As technology went like this, our sort of cruelty also went like this. We became capable of using the kinds of weapons we were capable of building, and that's continued. So, like in the 70s, it was safe for my family, just unaccompanied by anybody. We just took a public transportation right through the Khyber Pass, right, in the 70s, and didn't get hassled about it. But now it's like really armed to the teeth kind of thing to go through there. It's like if you measure civilization by how on edge a lot of these places are, you have to admit we've kind of fallen off a high point, maybe. I'd say, well, I won't try to say when the high point was. Maybe there was a period there where things were looking pretty good, maybe. But I might have to go back pretty far for that. Almost to the end of the 1800s, maybe. The beginning of the electrical age. That was pretty exciting. Those days. Anyway, we can talk history at will. Please leave your comments and subscribe if you find this kind of thing interesting. The previous video to this one will give you a little more context as to what this channel is about, or just watch a few more random videos. You'll get it. You'll get it. It's not that hard to see what my themes are. Talk to you soon.